Mike, firstly, I mean, the news today that Charlie Hurley died, I don't think anybody can not know of Charlie Hurley, the significance he had for the football club.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I don't think there's any words I can find to explain how important he was to this football club, but not just this football club, obviously the football world. And I was talking to Oscar before we came in, you just look at the kind of general outpour on social media for him, I think just kind of speaks volumes. I think from my perspective, and obviously the players and the staff downstairs, it's just obviously sending our thoughts out to the family and friends at this point. He's obviously a huge legend at this football club. I've obviously been here a short period of time, and he was obviously one of the first names that were kind of not presented to me, but he was one of the first kind of when I went on the stadium tour, was one of the first players that was explained to me in terms of his importance to the football club. Over 400 league games, player of the century I think voted for from the fans. So yeah, as I said, there's no real words from my perspective that can kind of justify just how important he was to the football club, but I think the kind of general outpour speaks volumes for how well regarded he is, not just in Sunderland and North East, but the kind of wider football community.
Thank you. And from your perspective now, going back to last weekend and the Millwall game, what's been the analysis and the sort of pulling that one apart? Because it clearly wasn't a great game, and you yourself said afterwards, you used the word boring.
Yeah, and that's what the analysis, when I sat down with the lads, that was the very first thing I said to them. I said I was bored watching you play, which hasn't been labelled at the group for a long time, I wouldn't have thought. We spoke, I think my frustration after the game, we spoke around what Millwall were all about, and I felt we gave them far too many opportunities to be Millwall. So that was my biggest frustration, my biggest kind of points that I took from the game. They've picked up some really positive results against teams above them, playing the way that they play, and they did the exact same thing to us that they did to some of the other clubs. And as I said, that was my kind of anger and frustration, because we spoke about that all week in terms of just not letting them bank up, not letting them survive on counter-attacks and set pieces, and we knew they would wait for that one opportunity, which they had done in previous games, and that's exactly what they did. They kind of painted their own picture, and we allowed them to do that. So that was a real frustration from my perspective, because we'd spoke about that all week. So yeah, we've debriefed it, we've spoke about it, we've had some honest conversations around it, and we've got to move forward to this Saturday.
Is there an element of it being a young team, sometimes you can level at young players that they don't want necessarily to take risks and take gambles when you're looking at taking a forward pass or a longer ball forward, or you don't want to make a mistake that sees you lose possession. I think you could look at someone like Chris Rigg in the game, and he's 16 and hasn't got that sort of fear in one sense. And he was one of the brighter sparks in terms of wanting to take players on and be a bit braver, if you like, on the ball. Yeah,
I don't think it's an age thing, it's a mentality thing, because you can be a 30-plus-year-old and still have that kind of psychological block when you need a player to take a risk and you need a player to pass forward quicker or risk or turn the ball over. That's regardless of age, and so Chris is a really, really good example in terms of his mentality. So it's more of a mentality thing for me. So I think that was one of the things we spoke around, as being a little bit more, taking more risks in possession, and knowing the way we set up, that even if I think we spoke so much around their threat on transition that it almost became a negative for us in the game, because we were so risk averse in terms of making that one pass that maybe they thought, oh, this could get cut out, and that's what they kind of survive on. But that being said, that's just being a good player, and I think the best players at the highest level make the right decisions 9 times out of 10, and that's what this group have to realise, and that's a part of my responsibility, is to continue to coach them and continue to work with them, because if they don't come over that hill or that hurdle, they won't get to where they want to get to, and ultimately they won't get us to where we want to get to. So look, it was hugely frustration, but I always go back to me and my seat. I've got to keep coaching them, I've got to keep working with them. You know, they are nowhere near the finished article individually or collectively. And there's still obviously clearly, you know, based on the period that I've taken the team, there's still clearly a lot of work to be done to get to where we want to be.
You've got a couple of games left. I know you talked previously about fielding your strongest, or what you could regard as your strongest team to win the games. You said at half time you took the tack off at the weekend because it wasn't working. Are you minded to maybe try Hamir or Burstow in the last couple of games, because Job's dropped deeper, or is Corey Evans now going to get sort of that role to allow you to put?
Nick, they're all the things that all week that you're discussing with the staff, and you're watching obviously the opposition, and you're looking at the way they train, and they're all the questions that we always have. And like I've always said, in this position, you make one decision that comes off and you're brilliant, you make another decision and it doesn't quite work, and you're the opposite to brilliant. So yeah, they're all the kind of dilemmas as someone that sits in my position that you always have, and you always try to make the best decision. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes it does. But yeah, in terms of the weekends, we'll be, you know, as I've always said, we're not going to be experimenting with anything, but what we will be doing is trying to put a team out to win a game of football. And that will be looking at us in terms of how can we hurt Watford, and it will also be looking at Watford in terms of what are their strengths. And once we kind of go through that process, obviously the team will get picked from that point.
Coaches seem to be getting younger and younger. Tom Cleverley's been appointed full time now, 34 years old. I mean,
makes me feel old.
Well, it's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, that is incredibly young to be managing, coaching a championship team.
Yeah, but he clearly deserves it. I mean, I've watched a lot of his games. They're very well organised. They've definitely changed their style, and they've gone in a very much a different direction from the previous head coach. So he clearly has an identity in terms of how he wants his team to play. He's obviously a legend there as well, which helps internally and externally in terms of that appointment. But ultimately, he wouldn't get that job if he hadn't have had some positive performances and positive results. So I've always said it's something at some point that I would want to do, but it's not something that I would be overly chasing. I know that there's a lot of things that I need to improve and be better at. But one thing I will say, I'm always delighted when a young coach gets an opportunity, and I really hope he's a massive success. Obviously not on Saturday, but after Saturday, I hope he's a huge success in the role. I
mean, you've talked about their organisation. I think he's been in charge of 7 games and has drawn 5 of them. The 3 of the last 4 have been 0-0 draws. I mean, it's sort of tending to suggest the weekend, because it's sort of not a free scoring team, that it's going to be a war of attrition, if you like.
Yeah, I think all the games in the Championship are a war of attrition, and the difference probably, I think, between the top and the bottom is the what I call the kind of X factor players that the top players have and the top teams have. And that's probably what sets them apart from the rest of the league. But yeah, look, as always, it's going to be a really, really tough game. As I said, Tom's completely changed their approach, which will be very different to the Watford team we played early in the season. Like all teams, they'll have some real strengths to the way they play, and they'll have some weaknesses, and it's our responsibility, my responsibility, the players' responsibility to make sure we nullify their strengths but also kind of execute the areas where we feel they're weak.
And personnel-wise, everyone? Okay, I dared ask that question because Dan Neil then ended up with that last week.
Yeah, everyone's fine. Obviously, we've got a training session tomorrow, so hopefully everyone will come through tomorrow and the squad will be what the squad is.
Right.
Cheers, Nick.
Anyway, I've got a softball question. What are the reasons for Sunderland fans to be cheerful at the moment?
Well, we've got the youngest team in the EFL, which would suggest that we've got a lot of players that have a huge amount of upside. I do think we've got a real core of a very, very good team that we feel need probably a little bit of support. You support that core, and I think you're not a million miles away from being a very strong Championship side. All those assets, if we want to call them assets, I don't like calling them players assets, but they're all under good contracts, long-term contracts, so the club has a huge amount of power, that if there was any anxiety around some players leaving, then there is a huge amount of power in the kind of club's position. That if anyone did want to come and take our successful players, then it's going to have to be at a premium. So in terms of that, I think there are a lot of positives. I think at the moment, obviously, we're middle of the table is nowhere near where we want to be. There's obviously been some things this season haven't gone as well as which we want them to be, but we will all be reflecting, in 2 weeks' time, to ensure that next season we have a much more positive season. And I'm 99% sure that next season will be a really positive season for everyone associated to the football club.
Well, that answered the next 3 questions as well, so I'm good. Thank you.